All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Valley Baptist Tabernacle. We're going to get started with the Adult Sunday School class. We got about halfway through looking at Exodus 3 through 4, all the way to verse 17. Amen. All right, so where we left off last time was Moses debating with God. So Moses' first question is, who am I to do this impossible task of bringing the people of Israel out of Egypt? And that was a good question that we saw last week. Who is Moses? How could he do this thing? Do you guys remember what the Lord told him? Almost. We're not quite there yet. Almost there. That's it. He said he would be with them. It's like, it's really all you need to know. It's like, who am I to do this? It's like, don't worry about it. I will be with you. Period. Full stop. I should kind of end the discussion. You know, the Lord of hosts is with you. But, you know, it's going to continue, and there's more conversation between God and pardon me, between God and Moses. But his answer is, you will not be alone. It would be impossible if you were alone, but since I'm with you, all things are possible. That's his response to Moses. And also what we were looking at is the sign that God would give Moses to verify that he would be with him. And it was not a sign that you would really expect, right? He gives him a sign that challenges Moses to trust him. So if you remember, he says, okay, here's how you'll know that I am who I claim to be and that I'll be with you. It's when you bring the children of Israel back to this mountain and you worship me right here at the same spot. It's like, that's your sign to verify that you should do what you should do right now. Like, but I haven't seen that yet. Right? As we'll get to it later today, like throwing a stick on the ground and it becoming a snake, it's a pretty, like, whoa, that's a sign. I can see it. It's right here. Okay, now I know what's going on. Okay, now I can trust that what you're saying is true and I can follow what you're saying. But when God says, no, I'll just tell you the end at the beginning, and you just got to trust me and watch me work. Okay. Right? Kind of tough. Oh, whoops. Hit the wrong button. We also looked at that word serve and how important that is. God isn't just bringing his people out of oppression for the sake of bringing them out of oppression. And it isn't their oppression. That's not the main reason why God is bringing them out of Egypt. It's to serve him, right? The promise is that when you come out of Egypt, you will serve the Lord on this mountain. And so leading Israel out of Egypt would not be complete until they made it to the mountain and they served God. And so that was important because we see that echoed in the New Testament in Romans, where you're either a slave to sin or you're a slave to righteousness or slave of Christ. You have to choose who you're going to serve in this life. You'll either serve God or you'll serve yourself, you'll serve money, you'll serve pleasure. I mean, fill in the blank with whatever God you want to serve. And we don't call them gods today, right? We don't use that kind of language. We call it, economic forces. They're these invisible forces that make you do things, but they're not gods because those aren't real. But there are these invisible forces that kind of push you one way or another, but they're not gods. Not the same thing, because we're in a post-enlightenment kind of society. We don't believe in those things anymore. Like, kind of ridiculous. But you have to choose who you're going to serve. And you must choose, and it's important. Then We also talked about how this isn't liberal theology, or liberal theology. Of course it's not. It's not liberation theology. I'm trying to do a recap. I got like pages of notes trying to condense it down. Liberation theology is a belief system that God is always on the side of the oppressed. And no matter where you are in the world, if you're part of the oppressed people group, then God is for you, and he wants to liberate you from that. Because that's who the God of the Bible is. He's a liberator. He's a savior. He's a deliverer. That's what he does. And if you hear someone say that, you're like, yeah, that is God. But what's the motivation behind that God? If it's not to put together a people who are holy and that worship Yahweh, and are, who ultimately comes in the human form in Jesus Christ, if it's not to serve and worship him, that's not the purpose of the liberation. Like, okay, so you're liberated to go do whatever you want? That doesn't really make any sense. Like, what's the motivation? With this liberation theology, the fundamental assumption is that the underdog, the oppressed, downtrodden are more virtuous and therefore more deserving of God's help. Just by the fact that they're oppressed, they have this kind of moral standing that's above those that are oppressing them. And that's just an assumption, right? And you get this little assumption that God does good to those that are good and evil to those that are evil, right? He pays them back what they deserve. And so good people deserve good things and bad people deserve bad things. And that's just, just take a minute and think about that. Do you believe that? Right. You reap what you sow, right? Usually, right? But notice if you just take that, that's it. That's all there is to it. Then there's no room for grace in that system. You only get what you deserve. God gives good to the good. God gives bad to the bad, and he's really good at distinguishing the good and the bad. If you're oppressed, then you're on the good side, and God owes you something better than what you've got. It's like this little sneaky assumption. What this is completely missing, and what it doesn't deal with, is that there are no good people. Everyone's a sinner. Everyone. On both sides, whether you're the oppressed group or the oppressors. That's pretty obvious if you're actually oppressing people, that you're a bad guy, right? It's pretty obvious. It might not be so obvious how much hate the oppressed class has for the oppressors. And that's evil too. But you don't see evil on both sides. That's not part of the system. So the tendency is to think that one side is morally good and the other is morally evil. And that one, since they're morally better, they're deserving of more justice. And this is exactly what perverts justice. So if you don't see this in our own day, this whole idea of equity and inclusion and social justice, there's a lot of that. It's not put in liberation theology terms, but it's put in more secular terms, right? So if you have an identity or you identify as a class of person that is oppressed or doesn't match up with the hegemony of the culture, which is like the ruling class of the culture, like if you're a white male heterosexual Christian, then you're the ruling class, fear for your life. Then you're the oppressor because you're keeping down all these other people, and you deserve bad because you are bad. And you don't deserve justice because everything is working in your favor. So all of these oppressed groups need social justice because they're a part of these oppressed groups, of course. But it's like, okay, so where does God fit in all of this? Well, God is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and he's looking for a people to worship him. And that's open to everybody because everybody's a sinner. And so if you repent of your sin and trust in Jesus Christ to save you from your sin, and from the consequences of your sin, and he'll save you. And if you worship him and you place your loyalty in Jesus' camp and not in your identity or not in your political identification or whatever, that's what God's looking for. And God will deliver you from your sin. He's promised to do that. Not just because you're deserving of more justice. Now that gets into a even broader question of the problem of evil and all that, which we don't have time to look at. But that's not what this story is about. This story is about God bringing a people out of Egypt to worship him. And if you follow the liberation theology, that last part just gets completely ignored. It's like the latter 2/3 of the book of Exodus is not important. The only important part is getting Israel out of Egypt. And then it's like, cool, God's done what he wanted to do, and that's it. You completely forget about the whole part of receiving the law, initiating a covenant with his people, and building a tabernacle so God can dwell with his people. That's all really the point of Exodus. But that's just ignored because people need to be liberated from their oppression. But I think there's something else going on here. All right. So we had, who am I? Now, who are you? If you were here when we did the word studies, you guys remember that? We looked at the Shema, and we looked at the name of God. This is like a very short, abbreviated version of that. God reveals his name to Moses. You have your Bibles. Flip open to Exodus. Starting this is Exodus chapter 3, starting in verse 13. And Moses said unto God, Behold, when I come unto the children of Israel, and shall say unto them, The God of your fathers hath sent me unto you, and they shall say to me, What is his name? What shall I say unto them? And God said to Moses, Ehyeh. It says I am, but in Hebrew it's Ehyeh. I am that I am. And he said, thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, I am, Ehyeh, hath sent me unto you. And God said moreover unto Moses, Thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel. Remember, the capital Lord is the English way of saying Yahweh. So it says English Lord Yahweh, right? So Yahweh, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. That word God is Elohim, hath sent me unto you. So Yahweh, skip all of the parenthetical of your fathers, of Abraham, of Isaac, of Jacob. Yahweh hath sent me unto you. This is my name forever, Yahweh. And this is my memorial unto all generations. So Yahweh and Ehyeh, they're the grammatically, I am is the first person singular of the verb to be. So I am, you are, that's second person. They are, third person plural. He is, that's third person singular. So Yahweh, so Ehyeh, I am, that's first person singular. And then Yahweh is he is, which is third person singular. That's important because if they go, hey, what is God's name? And he goes, and Moses says, I am. It's like, not me. No, it's he is, right? So Yahweh. And in the Hebrew, if we transliterate it from Hebrew letters into English letters that sound the same, it ends up being like YHWH. Because in Hebrew, there's only consonants. And then they added the vowel letters later in little dots around the consonants. So that's why it says Hebrew YHWH. So if you were reading it in Hebrew and you came across YHWH, what they started to do is instead of saying the name of God aloud, they would substitute that with Adonai, which is at the very bottom, Lord. Adonai is another Hebrew word that means Lord. So then they started substituting YHWH for Adonai. And then when they added the because it was just a string of consonants, if you can imagine that, just a string of Hebrew consonants. You had to know how to pronounce the words just based on context, and like it's wild. But then their children were learning Greek, and they weren't learning Hebrew, and they were like, "Oh, we don't want to forget how to pronounce these words," so they added dots around the letters to give you the vowel sounds. And so what they did, whenever they came to the name of God, YHWH, they would add the vowels of Adonai, so A, O, and I, kind of. And so what you end up getting is Yehovah, if you add those letters from Adonai to Yahweh. And then that gets kind of in the mix, and you have monks in the Middle Ages looking at these copies of transcripts that people have written out, and they see Jehovah, and they're like, "Oh, Jehovah, cool." And so that's how that name gets kind of added in as well. All of that to say that God reveals his name to Moses, and it's Yahweh. Yahweh. And so every time you see the capital letters L-O-R-D, and they're all caps, they have to be all caps, that's just the English way of referring to the name of God. So instead of translating it or transliterating it, meaning dropping it from Hebrew letter sounds to English letter sounds, instead of going Yahweh, they just put capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D. So whenever you see that, think Yahweh. And there's kind of the word God is general, right? Elohim is very general. There are many, many Elohim, right? There are gods. Elohim is actually plural. But there's only one Yahweh, right? He is the Elohim of Elohims. He's the God of gods. He's the Lord of lords. He's above. He's the most high. Because any spiritual being falls into the category of Elohim. So what distinguishes Yahweh from every other Elohim? Well, he's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He's the Elohim of this specific people, right? But what's his name? Yahweh. Yahweh. If the Israelites, this is what Moses is asking, if the Israelites ask me what your name is, what should I tell them? This is a quote from a note that I found in a study Bible, the Net Bible. Quote, Israel would not have had a nameless deity, especially since Genesis says that from the very beginning, people were making proclamation of the name of Yahweh. So if you go back to Genesis 4:26, it says that in those days, this is after the genealogy, like Cain kills Abel, and then Seth is provided to replace Abel. And it says right at the end of the chapter, just before chapter 5, and there's more genealogy, it says, in those days, the men began to call upon the name of the Lord, capital L-O-R-D, it's Yahweh. So it's, they've been using this name. It's not a nameless deity. It's possible that they did not always need a name if they were convinced that only he existed and there was no other God. But probably what Moses was anticipating was that the Israelites wanted to be sure that Moses came with a message from their God and that some sign could prove it. They would have known his name, Yahweh, and they would have known the ways that he had manifested himself. They would know the stories of their forefathers, of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, how God met with Abraham and talked to him face to face, the man, right, with his two angel buddies as they're on their way to Sodom and Gomorrah to destroy it. He comes down to earth and he meets with people in the form of a human. He shares a meal with them, and then he's like, I'm going to go check out Sodom and Gomorrah and see if it's really as bad as people are saying it is. And Abraham does his, like, oh, what if there's 10 righteous people, right? And he debates with God, kind of like Moses is debating with God. So they would, this is all sidebar, this is not part of the quote, sorry. So they understood how God manifested himself to their previous forefathers. Again, with the quote, it would do no good for Moses to come with a new name for God, but that would be like introducing them to a new God. That would in no way authenticate to them Moses' call, only confuse. After all, they would not be expecting a new name. They had been praying to their covenant God all along. asking for deliverance. That was me chiming in. They would want to be sure that their covenant God actually had sent Moses. To satisfy the Israelites, Moses would have had to have been familiar with the name Yahweh as they were, and to know that he appeared to individuals. They would also want to know, if Yahweh had sent Moses, how this was going to work in their deliverance, because they had been crying out to him for deliverance. As it turned out, the Israelites had less problem with this than Moses had anticipated. They were delighted when he came. It is likely that much of this concern was Moses' own need for assurance that this was indeed the God of the fathers, and that the promised deliverance was now to take place. So the point here is that when God gives his name, this is something that the Israelites down in Egypt would have recognized. It wouldn't have been something brand new that they wouldn't have recognized, because that doesn't really make sense. Like, they're crying out to deliverance to their covenant God, to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This is a singular being. So it's like, are you coming in the name of that same person, that same God? Like, yes, I am. This is his name. It's Yahweh. The point is that Yahweh is sovereignly independent of all creation, and that his presence guarantees the fulfillment of the covenant. So, Yahweh is his name forever in verse 15. This is what he does, right? This is who he is. You also get the idea of it's I am, right? He's the one that he is, right? And you can read endless commentaries about the name of God. It just forever. People have been talking. A lot of ink has been spilt about this passage right here, which is great. Kind of tiresome, but it's really, it's good stuff. What we need to know is that this just further shows that he is a God who keeps his promises. He's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He's the covenant Lord. And so giving his name, I am, he'll be with you today, but he'll also be with you tomorrow, because he's always present in the present. This is first person singular, like present tense, I am, right? So you might be like, oh, well, he's only with me right now. It's like, well, whenever right now is, he's with you, right? It could be 20 years from now. When you get there, guess who's going to be there? God will be, because he is, period. I am. It's also, this is also where he tells Moses to go. Again, that's important to notice. And that he's going to bring them out of Egypt. And this is a fulfillment of Joseph's prophecy. I saw that I think it was last Sunday, at the end of Genesis. So in verse 16, he says, "Go and gather the elders of Israel together, and say unto them, the Yahweh, the God of your fathers, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, appeared unto me, saying, I have surely visited you, and seen that which is done to you in Egypt." So that surely visited you. That's a direct quote from Genesis 50. You just flip back a couple of pages. Genesis 50, verse 24 and 20 through 26. "And Joseph said unto his brethren, I die, and God will surely visit you. He will surely visit you, and bring you out of this land unto a land which he sware to Abraham, Isaac, and to Jacob. And Jacob took an oath of the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you. You shall carry up my bones from hence. But Joseph died, being 110 years old, and they embalmed him. And he was put in a coffin in Egypt." So again, this is like pointing backwards, but also pointing forwards. Joseph said, eventually God's going to pull you out of Egypt. That's what Joseph said. Well, a lot of time has gone by. And so God is making reference again to a prophecy, essentially, that Joseph made. And he's saying, yes, I'm keeping that promise. I'm going to pull you out. Again, he's just layering. He's trying to make Moses confident in what the task he has to do. And he's like, look, I'm fulfilling this prophecy that even your forefather said. And if you're reading and you see that and you notice it, that's good. God is telling Moses what's going to happen before it happens. And he's keeping his covenant by pulling him out of Egypt. He's like, I've seen your circumstances. I'm here to change them. And the Israelites will listen to you. The Pharaoh will not listen to you and the elders. And this I know. And it's only after I demonstrate my power over his gods that he'll let you go. And that's kind of a summation of the next few verses before the next objection. And then you will plunder Egypt. That's right at the end of the chapter. So you will spoil Egypt like a victor in battle. This is another note from the Net Bible. So when the text says that they will ask their neighbors, or in here it says, verse 22, chapter 3, last verse, it says, but every woman shall borrow of her neighbor, and of her that sojourneth in her house, jewels of silver and jewels of gold and raiment, and shall put them upon your sons and upon your daughters. You shall spoil the Egyptians. That word borrow, borrow things, it implies that they'll be making many demands, and the Egyptians will respond like a defeated nation before their victors. The spoils that Israel takes are to be regarded as back wages or compensation for the oppression. So they're going to be like, silver and gold, and the Egyptians are like, get out of here, take it. Because they've been utterly defeated by Yahweh. So what if the Israelites do not believe me that you have sent me? What if they don't believe? God gives them 3 signs. This is chapter 4 through verse 17. There are 3 signs for Israel to authenticate Moses' claim that God sent him, that Moses is God's answer to their crying out for help. There's a staff into a snake. There's the leprosy, so he puts his hand into his robes, pulls it out. It's leprous, puts it back in. It's regular, or normal, I should say. And then there's the Nile River water into blood. Each one of these signs authenticates Moses before who? Who is he going to show these signs to? Okay, let's look at it. Chapter 4. And Moses answered and said, but behold, they will not believe me, nor hearken unto my voice, for they will say, Yahweh hath not appeared unto thee. And Yahweh said unto him, what is that in thy hand? So notice, they will not believe that you sent me. The Israelites won't believe. The Israelites won't believe that I'm sent from you. These signs are not for Pharaoh. Now, eventually, some of them will be used in front of Pharaoh, but Moses' concern is not about Pharaoh not believing. God just told him at the end of chapter 3 that Moses is not going to believe you, and he's not going to let the people go. Don't worry about Pharaoh. I'll take care of Pharaoh, God says. But Moses' concern is, are the Israelites going to believe me? That you appeared to me and that we're having this conversation and that you've called me to do this. That's his concern. And he goes, cool, what's in your hand? What's that in your hand? So something that we should recognize is that all the signs are foreshadowing of what is to come when God demonstrates his power over the gods of Egypt. So they are a foreshadowing, but specifically in this text, in this context, they're signs for Israel, not for Pharaoh. Eventually they'll get to Pharaoh, and God will demonstrate his power, like turning the whole Nile River into blood. Right here, it's just like, take a little bit of water out of the river, pour it on the ground, it'll turn to blood. Not the entire river turns to blood. That's for Pharaoh in Egypt. For Israel, that's going to be just a little bit, right? The staff into a snake, right? He's supposed to throw the staff down, it turns into a snake, and then you grab it by the tail, it turns back into a staff. That's for Israel. When he shows up before Pharaoh, he throws it down, and the magicians do the same thing, and then his staff gobbles up the other snakes, like, because it's more powerful. Yahweh's more powerful than the magicians and the priests of Pharaoh. And then leprosy, he just sticks his hand into his cloak, pulls it out. All the plagues are foreshadowed in the leprosy. The pestilence, the plagues, the awfulness, all of that is foreshadowed in that one little thing. So let's start with the staff. staff. There's a lot of irony going on with this staff. There are accounts in Egyptian writings that the Egyptian magicians could make a snake as stiff and rigid as a staff through some kind of trick, really. It's either hypnotism or they had some kind of way of making a snake super rigid, so that way you could pick it up and hold it straight out. There's Egyptian writings from that time that you could refer to. What God does is not a trick, but a miracle. This is not turning a snake, an animal, into something rigid. This is turning an inanimate object, piece of wood, into a living thing, a snake. This is a miracle. So one, it just trumps whatever the magicians are going to do in Egypt. That's kind of ironic, right? He turns a stick into a snake. It's the exact opposite, showing his power over the Egyptian priests. Another layer of irony is that God uses that which is despised to overcome that which is powerful. The Egyptians despised shepherds. We saw that again Sunday night, going through the story of Joseph. He's like, we need to put all these Israelites up in Goshen, and I'm going to talk to Pharaoh for you because the Egyptians hate shepherds. They despise them. Think you're just dirty and gross. He's like, don't worry, I'll take care of it. I'm in tight with Pharaoh. Cool. But you guys need to stay up in Goshen. You know, like, that's what he did for them, right? I mean, that's, I don't know, spicing it up a little bit, but that's essentially what happened, right? Because they despise shepherds. Yet it is the shepherd's staff that overcomes the Egyptian priests and magicians. God uses the weak things of the world to overcome the powerful, right? And what a great question. Well, first, the weak things overcoming the powerful. 1 Corinthians 1, 25 through 31. Because the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. For you see your calling, brethren, how that not many wise men after the flesh, not many mighty, not many noble are called. But God hath chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. And God hath chosen the weak things of the world to confound the things which are mighty. And base things of the world, things that are despised, hath God chosen. Yea, and the things which are not, to bring to naught things that are, that no flesh should glory in his presence. But of him are ye in Christ Jesus, who of God is made unto us wisdom and righteousness and sanctification and redemption, that, according as it is written, he that glorieth, let him glory in the Lord. That's what God does. And you see that right here. Like, that's just another echo of that principle right here in the book of Exodus. So, what a great question to ask. What's that in your hand? That's it. That's all God asks. Like, what is that? What do you have in your hand? What does God use when he calls you to a task? Something that you don't have? No. What's in your hand? What is that in your hand? What has God gifted you with? What have you learned? What are you good at? What's in your hand? That's the thing that God's going to use to accomplish his will. Right? It's a shepherd's staff. It's an ordinary object that would become the medium for the demonstration of divine power. Your ordinary life can be the medium through which God can demonstrate his divine power. When God calls you, he knows what he's getting. When he calls you to a task, he does not expect you to be something that you are not. He calls you, and you are to use what's in your hand to honor God. What are you good at? Are you good at baking? Do you make some cinnamon rolls for your neighbor and bless them? They're like, hey, I'll invite you to church. Or, hey, can I talk to you about the Lord? Something. Or what are you good at? You know what? If you got little ones, guess what your task is? To raise those little ones. What do you have? Your mission from God is to turn those little ones into people that will go into the world and bring the kingdom of God to the rest of the world. That's your task. What's in your hand? What can you do? Like, oh, if only I had this, or if only I had that. It's like, no. What's in your hand? What do you have? Don't think about all the things you don't have. Think about what do you have? use that to accomplish God's will. Whatever your station in life is, God knows exactly where you are and what you have. He can use that. What's in your hand? He calls you, and you are to use what's in your hand to honor God. Leprosy. A quote from another Net Bible quote. The sudden skin disease indicated that God was able to bring such diseases on Egypt in the plagues, and that only he could remove them. The whitening was the first stage of death of the diseased. So this was just a symbol of death. Right? First you have the symbol of the snake, which was a religious symbol for the Egyptians, and that would have struck home for them. Then you have this leprosy, which represents death. Like when someone is leprous, it's like, okay, we need to go stick them in a colony away from everybody else so they don't get everybody else sick and everybody dies of leprosy. Like basically you're the walking dead. You need to go over there and be away from everybody else. Yeah, I don't know if I should make an analogy. But yeah, fill in the blank if you feel that way. Everyone's sick. They're gonna get you. You just have to assume everyone's got it. Stay away. Like, oh man. It's almost like you have to understand, like everyone has to become at least a little bit educated on immunology. Just to be like, why are you so afraid? I don't understand. That's not how immunity works. Anyways, God demonstrated his power over the plagues, the body of man, man's health and well-being. This is demonstrating his power to heal what man could not heal, and ultimately demonstrate his power over creation itself. Like, I can heal you from this disease, or I can afflict you with it. I am God. That's what the sign of leprosy shows. God is in charge of all creation, of your health and well-being. Things can come, things can go. God is still in charge. He's in charge. The Nile River to blood. Again, quote from the Net Bible. This is a powerful sign. The Nile was always known as the source of life in Egypt. And so, I'm breaking in here. Metaphorically, this is massive. If everything that's good and right about life is represented in the Nile, and then you turn it into a symbol of death, that is huge. The source of life in Egypt, but now it will become the evidence of death. So the three signs are alike, each consisting of life and death. They would clearly anticipate the struggle with Egypt through the plagues. The point is clear, that in the face of the possibility that people might not believe, the servants of God must offer clear proof of the power of God as they deliver the message of God. The rest is up to God. All you got to do is deliver the message. That's all you're called to do. So, water from the Nile represents everything that's good and right about life and the provision for life. When the Nile is actually worshipped as a god in and of itself, that provided everything to sustain life. When the Nile River flooded, it, got everything, got all the land, the delta, wet, and you could plant. It would break up the soil. You could plant all your crops. I mean, it was worshipped as a god to sustain life. God takes that which represents life and turns it into a symbol of death. So be careful what you worship, what you sacrifice for, what you serve. That which seems to give you life, God can turn it around and show you that it leads to death. And if you don't worship God, it will lead to death. Last thing is, he's not an eloquent man, right? I don't have a way with words. He's not very diplomatic, right? Maybe he's a stutterer, or maybe he's worried that he can't speak Egyptian well because it's been 40 years since he's used Egyptian. Possible. God's answer again is that he will be with them. And it's not until Moses says, send somebody else, right, that God gets mad. So all of these objections, totally cool, until he says, send someone else. And so it's like, okay, God's servants, quote, must yield themselves as the instruments of God to the Creator. It makes no difference what character traits they have or the weaknesses that they have. Moses manages to speak very well if God is present. If the sovereign God has chosen them, then they have everything that God intended them to have to complete the task. If you're called to a task, go do it. Yahweh is fully able to overcome Moses' deficiencies, and Moses is exactly the way that God intended him to be. So this rhetorical question of like, who made man's mouth? Who did these things? Those rhetorical questions, like that's to drive that point home. But then Moses says something very interesting. Let's look at it. This will be the last thing. Verse 13, and he said, O my Lord, send, I pray thee, by the hand of him whom thou wilt send. And again, if you read it this way, it's like, and he said, O my Lord, send by the hand of him whom thou wilt send. So he's saying, Lord, I pray, please send whoever you're going to send. I'll tell him Godspeed. It's not me. That's what he's getting at. Pretty diplomatic way to say it. Instead of saying, I don't want to do it, stop talking to me. That's what makes God angry, right? Whoever that person is, good for them, but it's not me. And that's when God gets angry. This is rebellion against the will of God. When God had promised to be with Moses, Moses just doesn't want to go with them. And so God makes a concession. This is interesting. The Aaronic priesthood is a concession. You ever notice that? The priesthood of Aaron was not plan A. Look, he tells him right here. Look, he says, fine, I'll send Aaron. He'll be your mouthpiece. And the whole priesthood is built off that. Who was supposed to be the priest? And who ends up really being the priest? Moses, right? But it gets kind of broken off right here. And that's why in the book of Hebrews, Jesus isn't compared to Aaron. He's compared to who as a priest? After the order of Melchizedek, right? Not Aaron. He's not from the line of Aaron. He's from Judah. Because this whole thing, yes.
Aaron was chosen to be priesthood over
Definitely.
from the beginning. God, not both.
I mean, it's right here. He says, after this moment, that's true. But not until this moment. Well, if, let's say Moses he was a prophet, obviously, right? He spoke the word of God. He would have been priest, and he was the judge, or the king. So who's prophet, priest, and king for us? It's Jesus, right? All of those themes, those ideas, they all kind of mesh together in Jesus. And it would be another kind of foreshadowing of who Jesus would be. But it gets broken apart here because of Moses' rebellion. Because he doesn't want to do what God wants him to do. It's a concession, right? Moses was supposed to be this prophet, priest, and king. And that's why the writer of Hebrews appeals to the order of Melchizedek when claiming Jesus' priesthood, not the order of Aaron. Aaron's smooth talking becomes a problem. Just remember the golden calf situation. All right, so that is the end. All right, so question for you. I asked you last week if you wanted to go a little bit deeper into the two powers in heaven theology, which is a old Jewish theology that was gotten rid of in the Middle Ages because it corresponded with Christianity too much, and also name theology. Those are kind of sidebar background issues. If you're interested in those, I can bring that next week, and then we'll continue on in the life of Moses. If not, we'll just continue on in the life of Moses, and that'll be good to go. So, what say ye? Rabbit trails all day. Yeah. Rabbit trails second. All right. Any opposed? Okay, Okay, all in favor, say aye. Whoa, it's a business meeting. Oh, God. Oh, man. All right, well, thank you for your time and your attention. Let's pray. Our Father in heaven, thank you for this time. Thank you for your word. And I pray it's been an encouragement. Lord, help us to see what we have in our hands and use it for you. Lord, if it's time, if it's just a skill that you've given us, whatever it is, Lord, help us to see what you've already given us and use it for you. Thank you so much for this word, and I pray that you would be with Pastor as he preaches, and be with all the teachers that are teaching while he's preaching. Lord, help us to sing your praises. In Jesus' name, amen.